back to the BA Sports Podcast. It is week 10. The Broncos and Raiders are in full swing. Tanner and I are here to give you guys the start, sits, sleepers, and busts of the week for us. And to start it off, we're going to go through starts, then we're going to hit the sits. And following that, we're going to go into the sleepers and then finally the busts. And throughout the episode, we're going to be answering y'all's questions from the TikTok Live. So let's get it started off with the start for myself. It's going to be Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. I've actually got him at QB9 currently. He was QB8 versus San Francisco in week 5, top 8 quarterback in the last 4 out of 5 games. The San Francisco defense has been straight decimated, and it seems, Puka, Devontae, and Stafford are clicking on all cylinders. So I like Stafford this week as a top 10 quarterback. Tanner, who's your start at the quarterback position?
I've got two. I'm going to start with Justin Herbert. He's QB3 on the year in 4 point per passing touchdown leagues. He had nearly 28 fantasy points last week. He scored 18 plus fantasy points in 4 straight games, including 3 of which he scored more than 25. Now he's got Pittsburgh this week, who have allowed 19 plus fantasy points to 5 different quarterbacks this year through their first 8 games. Another guy I like this week is Jackson Dart. He's been electric as a rookie. He has 19 plus fantasy points in all but one of his first 6 starts in the NFL. That includes 3 games with more than 23 fantasy points. He has a great matchup this week against the Bears, who just allowed 470 yards and nearly 31 fantasy points to old man Joe Flacco.
I like that. I've got actually Jackson Dart QB6 on the week, Justin Herbert QB3 on the week. So let's go into some running back starts. Why don't we? Starting it off, it's going to be Quinshon Judkins for me out of Cleveland, coming off a bye. The Jets' run defense is totaling the 4th most missed tackles, 42 missed tackles among NFL defenses. And they just lost Quinnen Williams, who has an 82.7 PFF defensive grade. That ranks first among Jets defenders in weeks 1 through 9. They also lost Sauce Gardner on the back end. This defense lost definitely 2 of their best players, and I'm not sure how they're going to look coming out against Cleveland, who comes off fresh off a bye. And Judkins has 3 top 12 finishes this year so far, and he still hasn't played 65+% of the snaps. I think his highest snap percentage is 65%. And like we see after most bye weeks in years past, rookie usage does increase after the bye. So I would love to see this number creep up to 75% for Judkins this week, which could be huge. I have him as a top 15 running back this week, maybe even top 12. Let me double check that really fast. I think I have him 12th. Yeah, 12th exactly. Tanner, who are you starting at the running back position this week?
Yeah, ride with the hot hand, man. Fire up Rico Dowdle. He scored 28 fantasy points last week. He's completely taken over the role from Chuba Hubbard. This week he gets the New Orleans Saints, who have given up 14 plus fantasy points to 8 different running backs this season. Now, another guy I also like for running back is Jalen Warren. I know all the hype this offseason was about Caleb Johnson, Caleb. Well, Jalen Warren signed a contract right before the year started. They knew in training camp that he was going to be their guy. He's better in pass protection. He's just on the field more. Now, last week, Jalen Warren was awful. He had averaging 1.9 yards per carry, but he did score 2 touchdowns. Now, he's been very reliable with double digits fantasy points in 5 of his last 7 games. And the Chargers have allowed 3 running backs to score at least 27 fantasy points since week
Wow.
5. So start Jalen Warren if you have him.
I like those calls. Jalen Warren should be started in all leagues this week for sure. And now moving on to wide receiver for you guys. Sticking with that same game, how the Pittsburgh defense has looked horrendous. They are number 1 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing wide receivers. And I want to start Quentin Johnston of the Los Angeles Chargers. 10 wide receivers to score 15 plus PPR fantasy points against this Pittsburgh defense. Like I said, number 1, most points allowed. And it's hard to figure out which of the three receivers you want to start in this offense. Is it Lab McConkey? Is it Quentin Johnston? Is it Keenan Allen? I think you're starting all of them this week in that order too. Lab McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Keenan Allen. You could argue Keenan Allen would fall ahead of Quentin Johnston, but it's really tough to decide. And I think Quentin Johnston's explosive playability really helps him here. Tanner, who do you like at the wide receiver position? And I think this guy kind of had a down week last week, and so people could be hesitant to start him for sure. But who do you want to
Rome,
roll with?
the big Rome Odunze. Hey, Rome wasn't built in a day, all right? And for the last 3 weeks, Odunze has been nearly invisible. He had a goose egg last week. Did not help out fantasy managers one bit. Cardio, I guess he got some cardio at the very least. So I'm listing him because of that. I understand managers might be hesitant to play him. But he's got the Giants this week, whose defense have allowed the seventh most points per game to wide receivers, and 12 wide receivers have had at least 14 points against the G-men this year.
Yeah, that's a good call. I think Caleb wants to get him back on track after Caleb had actually more receptions than Romo Dunze last week, which is a shocking stat. I can't believe I just said that out loud, but it's a fact. Um, Now let's get into the tight end position, and I'm gonna go with one of the guys that I like. I'm sticking with this Cleveland offense, I guess. You know, Dylan Gabriel's leading this Cleveland offense, and they have some young rookies we really like. Harold Fannin Jr. He's got 11 plus PPR fantasy points in the last 3 of 4 games. He's got a great matchup off the bye, and like I said, rookies like to get used more often after the bye week. Njoku, I like as a sleeper play here as well. I think they're going to be targeting the short area tight ends in this matchup. I mean, Dylan Gabriel, we've seen it. You know, they could get Cedric Tillman back to take some downfield shots with Dylan Gabriel, but Dylan Gabriel hasn't been that guy yet this year. I think he's a little hesitant on making mistakes and taking the deep shot. So I'm going to go with Harold Fannin as a start at the tight end position. I think you can lock him in as a top 10 tight end this week, especially with a couple of teams on by this week. Tanner, who do you like at the tight end position as far as starts go?
Yeah, so actually, it's another rookie, Oronde Gadsden. Dude has been absolutely on fire since he burst into the fantasy scene, scoring 71.1 combined fantasy points across the last 4 weeks, where he's seen at least 5 targets in every single game. This week is against the Steelers, who have allowed the third most points per game to tight ends and have allowed 5 tight ends to score double digits against them. So fire up Oronde Gadsden once again. Now, another guy I wanted to talk about is Dalton Kincaid. He's going against the Dolphins, who have given up 10 or more fantasy points to 7 tight ends this year and the fifth most points per game to tight ends. I think both those guys you can't go wrong with this week.
Yeah, I agree. I like both of them this week. I actually have Kincaid as a top 5 tight end, and Gadsden, I've got him tight end 3 on the week, which could be a bold call. And then I got Harold Fannin tight end 9. So let's move into some sits of the week. Starting off, it's going to be quarterbacks, and then we're going to go into running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Uh, Going to be Trevor Lawrence for me at the quarterback position. This Houston defense is legit this year. They're number one versus quarterbacks in fantasy points allowed. And Lawrence has been performed pretty well lately. Last 4 games, he's QB5, QB13, QB14, and QB12. So on the verge of a QB1, definitely QB1 where he finished QB5 on the week. Week 3 versus Houston, he was QB28. Week 4 last year at Houston, he was QB16. It's hard to trust him as a QB1 this week. I don't think he finishes as a top 12 quarterback. I mean, this Houston pass rush, the secondary, D'Amico Ryans has his defense firing on all cylinders. They are legit. We saw it last week against this Broncos offense, who honestly is struggling right now against the Raiders. But at the same time, I mean, Houston's been stout all season long against quarterbacks, against the run. They are a tough defense to score against. I think they're the number one scoring defense on the year. Tanner, who do you like as a sit? I shouldn't say like. Who do you dislike this week and want to sit at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I think it has to be Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, he's already impossible to trust in fantasy, and his matchup this week against the Bills is a huge risk. Their defense has allowed a quarterback to score more than 15 fantasy points against their defense has not allowed a quarterback to score more than 15 fantasy points against them since week 2, and they just held Patrick Mahomes to 10 and a half fantasy points. So unless it's a super flex league, I would sit Tua. And I'm sorry, did I say the Dolphins? I meant to say the Bills.
Chat, drop the questions in the chat for the TikTok audience. Yeah, I think Tua is tough to start this week, and another guy that people could be wanting to start this week. Running back position is slim. We're gonna move on to the running back position. It's Zonovan Bam Knight. You know, everyone wanted to start him last week, including myself. But this week is a different story. Seattle's defense has been stout this year, not only against the run, but against the pass as well. As they've gotten healthier, you know, that defense has just looked better and better. And I think they are possibly at the healthiest they are have been in the last couple of weeks. He was only 57% of the snaps last week. DeMercado at 40%. He only has 2 top 24 finishes on the year in his 4 total games. The Seahawks limited Trey Benson to 35 rushing yards. That was due to a negative game script. And I think the negative game script in this one, if it were to happen, it's going to favor DeMercado again. So I am trying to avoid Bam Knight anywhere I can this week. And we're going to go over some streamers, some sleepers later at the running back position that could be helpful, could be available for you out there to fill a guy like Bam Knight or a guy like Tanner's going to talk about coming up next at the running back position. Tanner, who do you have as a sit at the running back position?
Yeah, it's got to be Alvin Kamara, bro. He's having the worst year of his career. He's averaging only 9 fantasy points per game. And last week, he put up a 0.7 point performance. I mean, regardless of the matchup against the Carolina Panthers, you simply just cannot trust, you just can't start the guy.
Yep, I agree. Can't start him anywhere. He's tough to trust at all. I mean, Tyler Shuck leading that offense. Both of us have experienced the downs of him at quarterback when we were at Texas Tech. But the Saints fans, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I warned you what was coming because we had experienced it once or twice at Texas Tech. Let's go into the wide receivers now. Jordan Addison is going to be my sit at the wide receiver position. And JJ McCarthy, he's back. 25 attempts last week, highest all year, but only 14 completions. That's a season high for JJ McCarthy, and that was last week. He hasn't had over 160 yards passing in a game this year. Jettis is obviously the number one target. He's going to get the majority of those yards. You can probably count Jettis good for like 8 catches, 70 plus yards. But then who gets the other 90? I guarantee you it's not all going to Jordan Addison. It's going to get spread around to TJ Hawkinson as well, a little bit, maybe Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason. It's tough to trust Jordan Addison with JJ McCarthy back as a starting quarterback. He's just not having to pass as much as Carson Wentz did, and that's also due to the good defensive play that they defense played lights out last week against
Mhm.
this Lions offense that's been good to start the year, been good all season, but the Vikings defense, showed up and showed out when needed, and I think this is the game plan going forward for the Vikings. Myself, I traded away Justin Jefferson, and I kind of don't regret it after seeing JJ McCarthy last week and the previous 2 games this year. So, Tanner, tell the listeners who you can look out for to sit at the tight end position.
Yeah, it's actually in that same offense, Brady, and it's going to be TJ Hawkinson. And it's really, going off that JJ McCarthy stat, the kid hasn't completed more than 14 passes in a game through 3 games. I mean, I don't want Jordan Addison. I don't want Justin Jefferson. I don't want TJ Hawkinson. Like, that's just get me the hell away from that offense. Now, I know TJ Hawkinson scored a touchdown last week, but he still didn't even score 10 fantasy points. He's had single digits in 4 of his last 5 games. And since JJ McCarthy's been starting, he averages fewer than 4 targets a game. I think Hawkinson is almost impossible to trust. Now, another guy I want to talk about at the tight end position, sit Zach Ertz. He only had 8.6 points last week in the loss to Seattle. He's failed to score double digits in 5 of his last 7 games. We all saw the injury to Jaden Daniels, which is really bad news for Zach Ertz's target share. He has a really tough matchup this week against the Lions, who have allowed only 3 tight ends to score 10 or more points against them in a game this year. Sit Zach Ertz.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of either of them this week. I was a little bit of a fan of Zach Ertz last week. He did not pay off. Big mistake on my end. I'm not ranking him above Kate Otten, not ranking him above Juwan Johnson this week. Juwan Johnson has a pretty decent matchup, and let's just roll right into Juwan Johnson. Leading off the sleeper section, he is going to be my tight end 15 or 16 of the week. I haven't decided that yet, but he's up there. But the tight end position is pretty deep this week. I'm not going to lie. You've got Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Gadsden, Kittle. I mean, there's so many different options. It's usually not this deep, it feels like. So if you took a tight end late, good on you. Juwan Johnson is a low end tight end one this week. He could be available to stream in the majority of your leagues. You know, with Shaheed going to Seattle, Juwan Johnson is easily the number 2 target in this offense now. Tyler Shuck, he's been dinking and dunking. And 10 plus PPR fantasy points in 3 straight games for Juwan Johnson. 11 plus PPR fantasy points allowed by Carolina 4 times this year to tight ends. We've seen success at the tight end position against this Carolina offense. In a game script, I believe the Saints are going to be thrown in. I think Carolina's going to have a lead. They're going to lean on Rico Dowdle. Hopefully he goes. I think he will. They said they need him this weekend, and I wouldn't doubt it. Tanner, we're going to keep in the same game with this one. Who do you like as a sleeper at the wide receiver position?
Yeah, this week I have Tet McMillan of the Carolina Panthers. Look, the numbers were bad last week. He only had 8.6 fantasy points, but he's got the Saints this week, who have allowed the 4th most points per game to perimeter receivers, and 9 receivers have scored at least 16 or more fantasy points against them in a game, regardless if they're on the outside or in the slot. So they're just getting absolutely shredded by receivers this year. I think Tet McMillan's a safe start.
Yep, I do too. And we're going to keep talking about our former Saints player right here, Rashid Shaheed, as a sleeper of the week. New location for Rashid Shaheed, but he's familiar with this offense. Sam Darnold ranks 6th most for passing touchdowns of 20 plus yards. He ranks 1st in most passing yards of passes that travel 20 plus yards. Torrey Horton's produced 2 20+ yard touchdowns and has the 6th highest ADOT. For those of y'all who don't know what ADOT is, it is average depth of target. So he is getting targeted deep. And I believe Rashid Shaheed takes Torrey Horton's place in this offense, essentially. Shaheed's familiar with the Kubiak offense. He had him last year as his New Orleans offensive coordinator, and they used it to their advantage with the play action. Well, what do they have? They've got Ken Walker. They've got Zach Charbonnet. I think this opens stuff up for Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who have seen more loaded boxes. You know, defenses had to have worried about JSN, but now they got to worry about JSN and Rashid Shaheed. You know, I'm sure defenses were worried about Torrey Horton. He's got blazing fast speed, but Shaheed is a different animal. He's an experienced veteran wide receiver. I think this is a fantastic pickup by Seattle. And I think it's just going to make Sam Darnold look even better. I think it's going to make this offense look better. And I really love Rashid Shaheed. I think you can put him as a wide receiver 3 flex play for your lineup this week without hesitation. Tanner, who do you like as some streaming options out there for the listeners in some deeper leagues, maybe some shallow leagues?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of them, Brady. Appreciate you asking. And also just a real quick thing on Torrey Horton. I too was disappointed to see the Rashid Shaheed move. For that reason, I wanted to see more Torrey this year, and I know for sure dynasty managers were hoping to see the same thing. Interesting stat about Torrey: the guy has 14 catches on the year and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's insane. So I was really excited to see him and maybe what he'd turn into in this Clint Kubiak offense. But it's no surprise to see them trade for Shaheed. Clint knows how to use him. He's already used him well. And as far as what you should expect from Shaheed, I mean, he could be a 2 for 20 guy, or he could be a 3 for 90 guy and a touchdown. I mean, he's very, very explosive, very deep threat behind. He's a Deshaun Jackson, Ted Ginn Jr. esque type of player, if you will. Now going into streamers for the week, I want to start with the Seattle Seahawk, and I'll be quick on this. That's Zach Charbonnet. The Cardinals have allowed 12 or more points to 8 running backs, including 4 with over 18 fantasy points this year. Now another guy I want to talk about, Woody Marks, the rookie. Listen, I know the app is showing you a red matchup, but take this into consideration. He has 12 plus points in 3 of his last 5 games. He gets the Jaguars this week, but they have allowed 3 running backs to score at least 18 fantasy points against them since week 4. So fire up Woody Marks if you need a stream. This could be a good flex option this week. Another guy, Romeo Dobbs. So Tucker Craft out for the year. We know that. Romeo has double digits in 4 of his last 5 games, and he gets the Eagles this week, who have allowed 9 wide receivers to score at least 12 points against them this year. Another guy like in the same division is going to be Jameson Williams, 16 plus points in 2 of his last 3 games. He gets the Commanders this week, who have allowed 14 wide receivers to score at least 10 points against them this year. And last but not least, at the tight end position, Theo Johnson. I mean, double digits in 4 of his last 6 games. We all know how slim tight end can be. I mean, that's pretty good production. And the Bears have allowed double digits to 3 tight ends since week 6. Plug in Theo Johnson if, let's say, you have a Travis Kelce or Jake Ferguson on a bye. Now, Brady, what about
Yeah,
you? Do you have any streamers this week? Any guys you like out there?
I got one guy I like, but before I go into him, I want to mention that Woody Marks call that you had. Just also, Nick Chubb didn't practice on Wednesday. He was limited today on Thursday. We'll see what his status is tomorrow on Friday and throughout the weekend, but that's something to monitor. So Woody Marks has probably been getting reps with the ones this week. That's good that he's the healthy running back. So definitely, like Tanner said, I know you're seeing red on the matchup screen, but don't underestimate Woody Marks, especially in PPR leagues. He can pay off that value with his receptions and maybe even getting into the end zone. But now I'll go into a guy like this week, especially if James Cook is indeed out. But even if James Cook isn't out, I still like this guy. It's Ray Davis of the Buffalo Bills. Miami's number 6 in most fantasy points allowed to running backs this year. We've seen running backs tear them apart this season. And this is a divisional matchup for the Bills. So if they can limit James Cook's usage in this game and get out of the game healthy and they're blowing them out, they're going to give Ray Davis some run, and I'm fine with starting Ray Davis as a flex play this week if you have to, especially in PPR leagues. I think he can pay off the value, maybe even sneak into the end zone for a touchdown. But he is a deep league streamer, and I would definitely put him in the RB2 conversation if James Cook is out. Maybe even like high end RB2, borderline RB1. Like I'd probably have him in the range from 15 to 20. I would think is where I'm ranking him right now. I've got him down at RB 30 right now, just ahead of Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. If that's any indication of maybe you shouldn't play Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt this week. Um, but that's been the case the past couple weeks. So yeah, that's a guy I like. And now let's go into some busts, Tanner, and I'll lead it off with Travis Etienne. Speaking of this matchup versus Houston, he's got a very bad matchup. Touchdown saved him in his last game against Houston earlier this year. But he averaged 3.5 yards per carry in that game. That's the second lowest yards per carry for the season. Or no, first lowest. Second lowest was against Seattle. And then 22 carries last week was the season high for Etienne. Bright spot. 5 catches last week, tied his season high. Also another bright spot. I thought Tootin would get more involved last week, but I don't know if they're going to involve him more this week. He got outsnapped by LaQuint Allen. I just think Travis Etienne in the bad matchup, they're not allowing over 4 yards per carry to running backs. Like I said, he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. You're hoping he gets into the end zone. I'm not saying sit him. I'm saying watch out for bust alert and maybe stream a guy over Travis Etienne. They've held Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry to single digits this year against the Houston defense, stout against running backs. Tanner, who is a bust for you this week?
Yeah, going back to the Saints offense and Tyler Shuck.
Ugh.
Look, it's Chris Olave, guys. He only had 4 targets in Tyler's first start. He doesn't have a good matchup against the Panthers, whose defense have allowed the fourth fewest points per game to wide receivers, and they've only given up 5 touchdowns all year to the position. We know Tyler's not worth a shit, so sit Chris Olave.
Yep. That's a tough
Or
one.
excuse me, he's a bust. I mean,
Yeah, I would say, let me see where I have him right now. I want to say I have him like maybe low end wide receiver two area, high end wide receiver three. Currently, no, he is high or low end wide receiver two, but yeah, it's the JC Horn Island may be in full effect in this game. Carolina's looked very good against wide receivers, and I'll go into the final bust. DK Metcalf, the Chargers number 3 against wide receivers this year. DK's been very inconsistent. He's got 3 top 13 finishes and 5 finishes outside the top 27 at the wide receiver position. Every game he has a top 12 finish in, he scored a touchdown, which 3 touchdowns in 3 games. I think he has maybe 5 touchdowns overall. He has the potential to be a wide receiver too. I would probably start him as a wide receiver 3 flex play this week, but I'd be very very cautious about having high expectations for DK Metcalf. The Chargers have only allowed 4 touchdowns all year to opposing wide receivers, which, like I said, he probably needs a touchdown to pay off as a top 12 wide receiver this week. But if you've got depth and you can throw him in the flex, it's not a terrible, desperate situation. But I would look to go elsewhere. I would probably go Romeo Dobbs over DK Metcalf. I would probably go DJ Moore over DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen over DK Metcalf, and even Quentin Johnson over DK Metcalf this week. So definitely temper expectations this week with DK Metcalf. Um, Tanner, you got anything else for the listeners before we wrap this thing up?
who has questions for us? Because I'm very ready to go through the rankings and try to help some of you guys out. Now, I know we have Alex over here in the Riverside chat. He says, or Brady, I'll let you address the question for the TikTok viewers to hear.
Yeah, so question from Alex. He said, "This is my team this week. What do you think?" He's got Drake May, James Cook, Quinshon Judkins, JSN, and Emeka Buka. Stacked team. Trey McBride, Wandale Robinson, I'm guessing. And then he's got bench JCM, Travion Henderson, Caleb Williams, Jawan Jennings. I would assume that's Woody Marks, Romo Dunze, Blake Corum, and Alec Pierce. Tanner, would you start Romo Dunze over any of those guys? Would you start Romo Dunze over Wandale? Say, I think that's probably a decision he would look to make.
Yeah, I think I would. I think it's a no-brainer. I would totally start Romo Dunze over Wandale. I think Drake May, JSN, Judkins, McBride, and Egbuka are pretty much must starts, especially this week. You could consider Woody Marks instead of Rome, but I don't think it's necessarily close. I think you have to start Rome. I would start Rome Odunze this week over guys like Devontae Smith, Garrett Wilson, Tet McMillan, Jalen Waddle. I would even start Rome Odunze over Quinshon Judkins this week. I think Rome's gonna have a great week.
Yeah, I agree. I think you got to start Rome, Alex. PGN said, "Is Justin Jefferson the best in the league?" Tanner,
Ooh, not with JJ
I
McCarthy anymore.
Yeah, I think Jamar's probably taken that easily. I would say Jamar's best in the league, and then as far as fantasy goes, he's probably right now one of the best fantasy receivers. As far as it goes this week, though, Tanner, who would you say your top fantasy receiver on the week is? It's tough to choose between. I'd say Puka, JSN, or Amon Ra.
And I think you just hit it right there, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'd probably give 4 to Drake London, and then 5 is where I would fit Jefferson. And for you guys out there with Egbuka, he's the next man up at number 6, just to give you an idea of sort of where he's at this year. And actually, I mean, the matchup is so good against the Rams this week. Devontae Adams is flying into the top 10 for me this week, too.
Yep. Tanner, we got a question from
Mhm.
C-Man on TikTok. Should he start Romo Dunze over Chris Olave? I'm going to say yes to that. C-Man, start Romo Dunze over Chris Olave.
I totally
And I
agree.
assume you would agree.
Yes, yes,
Based
yes.
on your starts and your bus calls, I think we both agree, C-Man. Definitely start uh, Rome over Olave. Okay, Tanner, another one. AJ Brown or Emeka Egbuka. For me, I'm gonna go with Emeka Egbuka. I don't know. We've got the full participant in practice from AJ Brown this week, but I still think Emeka Egbuka ranks higher than him. I actually have Egbuka wide receiver 7. I've got AJ Brown wide receiver 14. Would you agree with that call, Tanner?
Yeah, I've got Egbuka at 6, and remind me who the second AJB at
AJ Brown.
12. And
Okay.
yeah, like you said, they're probably resting him, but as far as practice goes, but I think Egbuka clear is clear.
Another question. This guy's like the number one Justin Jefferson fan. He said, does Justin Jefferson get force fed 19 targets for only 91 yards with JJ McCarthy this week? And I'd say he'd be lucky to even get 19 targets in general. Because like we talked about, Tanner, JJ's not even throwing that much. The
No.
most he's attempted is 25 pass attempts in a game this year.
Yeah, and again,
So
the most he's completed is 14 passes in a game. I can't imagine wanting to roster any of the Vikings weapons as far as wide receivers or tight ends go.
okay, PJN is a really big Justin Jefferson fan. So I'm gonna say in fantasy wise, PGN, Justin Jefferson isn't gonna get the points like Jamar Chase. I'm not saying that he's not the wide receiver Jamar Chase is. We're not saying that. We just think the spot he's in with the quarterback he has, they're not as good fantasy wise. But they're on the same level as a general wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, you put Justin Jefferson on any other team, heck, I know your Patriots would be happy to have him, Tanner, right?
Absolutely.
So like
Absolutely.
it's just tough. It's tough. All right, Tanner, we got a trade question actually that just came in. It's Tep McMillan and Tajay Spears for Omarion Hampton and Darius Slayton. Need a good running back for the playoffs. Would you do that trade to get Omarion Hampton and give up Tep McMillan and Tajay Spears?
I don't think I would at this time being. Too many question marks around Hampton's status. They're rumoring that he might not come off until their bye, which I believe is week 12. So we're maybe looking at a week 13 start if he's healthy. But at the same time, you could make the argument that we don't even know if he's going to play again this year. I
Mm-hmm.
certainly feel
Yep,
that way about other guys on IR like Travis Hunter. So
I would agree.
I think I would hold. Now Spears is on the up and up. He's looked really good the last couple weeks. Titans were listening, at least listening to trade calls for Tony Pollard this past weekend and on Monday and Tuesday. And
This
I
could
think I would
change your
hold
mind.
steady.
This could
Hmm.
change your mind. he, his wide receiver core is very stacked. So he has Igbuka, JSN, and Rice after trading Tet, and says he has a 95% chance of making playoffs.
Hmm.
I would say you only make that trade if you can afford to lose both of them and wait on Amari and Hampton if your running back depth is good enough to get through these next couple of weeks. But you also gotta, like Tanner was saying, you gotta think about what if he doesn't come back? What if you're just screwed now at the running back position because he's not there? He had a setback in his injury. They're shutting him down for the year, something crazy like that. They're going to save him for the actual NFL playoffs. It's stuff like that that you're taking a risk, but it could be worth the reward. He's got CMC and Bucky and Rashad White, so he's got the handcuff in Tampa Bay if needed. Um, David, I think you with that setup you're telling me you have right now with CMC, with Rashad White, and then you got Bucky waiting, and then you have Igbuka, JSN, Rasheed Rice. Like You've got the depth to possibly make this trade. I would see if you can make that trade without giving up Tajay Spears. That way it gives you a little buffer at the running back position just in case you need it and Omarion Hampton does have a setback. But if you want to go all out, go for Omarion Hampton. Go for it. I won't stop you. I don't think it's a bad call. It's definitely a risky one, but your team seems good enough to where you can pull it off.
Yeah, and sometimes it just comes down to is this where you start two flexes and stuff like that. But totally agree with Brady's advice on that one for you.
All right. Any other questions, you guys on TikTok? Drop them. Tanner, you have any thoughts on week 10 in general? Any hot takes?
Hmm. So going back to that original question about Jacoby Brisket or Mac Jones, personally, I'd start Mac Jones, not because of his history with the Patriots. Please don't remind me of those times. But I think I do lean Mac Jones in that. Dude's been balling in the Shanahan offense. I mean, rumors are swirling. Is Brock Purdy going to get his job back?
Yeah,
TBD. But
I
I
don't
think
know.
I would go with Mac. Love the
I think I
matchup
would
against
too.
the Rams. Now Brisket, prior to beating up on the Cowboys Monday Night Football, which is everybody's get right game in the NFL when they face the Dallas Cowboys, he was averaging 300 passing yards per game. I love the value he's brought to Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is somebody you would want to trade for the rest of the year. I guess for my last comments, yeah, I do have a few players that I think you guys should look to target. Brady, feel free to repeat this so that the viewers on TikTok can hear it. And those guys are going to be Jalen Warren. We look at and these guys are
Yep.
based on their schedules the rest of the season, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be guys like Jalen Warren, Quinshawn Judkins, Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, you want a hot take? Mark Andrews is going to go off for the remainder of the year. Look at his schedule.
Lamar's
And then
back.
lastly, I really like Jamison Williams the rest of the year. He's gonna go. I mean, and Jared Goff too, because you know how he plays at home. They've got some home games, some in the dome games. And a guy that I would be looking to get rid of, whereas some people might be looking to, double down on and believe in, would be Xavier Worthy. The guy hasn't been any good. He's at best the third option in that offense, and I mean he might even be four with when Hollywood Brown's out there. Worthy's been awful. I'd look to get rid of him rather than trade for him. And then I think my last hot take would be that Brian Thomas Jr. has been the biggest bust in all of the redraft leagues. Brian Thomas Jr.
Yep. I agree. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is tough to start that guy right now. You're definitely not starting him this week. Now I know he's banged up a little bit. He may not even
Mm-hmm.
play this
And
week, but
Parker
if
Washington
he, yeah,
and
and Jacoby
Jacoby.
Myers, the new
Mm-hmm.
acquisition. Watch out for Jacoby Myers this week. I mean, I wouldn't start him against this Houston defense. If you have Jacoby Myers, just to preface, this Houston defense is legit. This is why I called Trevor Lawrence as a bust. But Tanner, let's tell the listeners about a trade that went down in my league that I made for the number one player in fantasy football. Guys, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I got Jonathan Taylor. This guy has
And
traded
and
not only Jonathan Taylor, oh yeah, and Jameson Williams. So this guy's not
bang.
only traded Jonathan Taylor, he's also traded Christian McCaffrey. I'm not sure what's going through his head. He just may not like running back ones. I don't know what to tell you, but he's traded the top two running backs in fantasy this year. I believe they're the top two. I'm looking right now just so I can make sure that that's correct, but um, it's shocking to me that he pulled that off. But I gave up Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, and Travion Henderson, who could have a breakout week this week. But at the same time, he is no Jonathan Taylor once Ramondre Stevenson comes back. And Jameson Williams, I think he has more upside than DJ Moore. I like that offense a little bit better than the Chicago offense, even though, Chicago offense has looked good. I just think, you know, sell high on DJ Moore if you can. Had a great week last week. He hasn't really produced this year. Justin Jefferson, it's a guy that we've been kind of ragging on later on in this episode. Um, He's just not the fantasy wide receiver he has been in previous years, and that's just because JJ McCarthy doesn't throw the ball as much as his previous quarterbacks have. Tanner, we got one more question.
Mhm.
Speaking of trades, this is a weird scenario that he's asking this question because technically the NFL trade deadline is passed, but he says, who would trade for Saquon? Who'd be the first team like you would think to trade for Saquon, I guess?
In the
If
in,
Saquon
in
was to get traded.
in
So
the
I
real
guess
world,
who's the neediest running back team that would trade for Saquon? And I
well,
have the answer. There's one answer, I think.
I agree. Who do you think it is, Brady? Without me,
The Can- the Kansas City Chiefs.
ugh.
I'm just stating the obvious.
I don't know that there's any way they would trade him to the Chiefs, but I think they would definitely be looking to trade him out of the conference. And
Uh,
I'm gonna be biased and say the New England Patriots.
yeah, I could see that too. The Patriots. Hey, but the Chiefs are out of the conference too. They just meet them in the Super Bowl every year, so they don't want that to happen.
Right.
Oh
Exactly my thought
no.
process.
This guy said Nick's got me 12 points. He's 7-2 in PPR 16-man league. Should have started Sam Darnold. I don't know. I would have probably started Bo Nix too. Just a disappointing performance from this Denver offense, if I'm being honest tonight. It is a divisional game, so like I don't know. Divisional games get weird. Short week. I
Yeah.
thought the Denver offense was going to come out firing on all cylinders, but they kind of looked dead out there. Kind of looked like they were just playing off the Houston game where they couldn't get much going on offense either. But the Raiders defense is not the Houston defense, so tough night if you started, any Broncos or Raiders, unless you got Troy Franklin and Ashton Genty. They were able to sneak into the end zone for you. Um, yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it for us, though. Tanner, any other thoughts you'd like to say before we close this one out?
Not many, man. Don't beat yourself up about the Bo Nix start. I don't think it was particularly close between him and Sam Darnold this week. I think you made the
I
right
agree.
choice, like Brady was saying. Just short week divisional matchup, and the Broncos have shown on more than one occasion that they don't like to really do much on offense till the second half, and sometimes just the fourth quarter.
Yep. And they didn't do much at all this week. But that's going to do it for the BA Sports Podcast, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We went over the starts at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end position. Then we went over our sits, some sleepers, some streamers that could help you. If you have a couple guys on bye, two of the top offenses on bye this week in Cincinnati and Dallas. So a lot of weapons are on bye. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Javonte Williams, Chase Brown, Dak Prescott, and Joe Flacco. So a lot of
Rasheed
guys on
Rice,
bye
Travis
for those two
Kelsey,
teams.
Jake
Mahomes,
Ferguson, Mahomes,
yeah,
Dak.
there's a lot of top offenses in the NFL are on bye this week, so you could be struggling out there. And we laid out some streamers for you guys, and then we went into some busts, some guys we don't like this week, some guys you want to temper expectations about, and then finally we answered some of y'all's questions on the live. So appreciate y'all throwing those in the chat. Uh, Really helps everything flow. If you guys could please give us a like on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, that would be much appreciated. Rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts. Helps the audience grow. Share it with a friend if you know someone that needs fantasy football advice. That's why we're here. That's why we do this, to help you guys win fantasy championships. So good luck in week 10, guys. We look forward to week 11. Get the dub in week 10 so we can go into next week on a high note. And I hope you all have a great weekend of football in general. Look out for the full weekly matchup analysis on X, every start, sit, sleeper, and bust for every single game coming out on Saturday, a day before Sunday. And don't forget, guys, we got our early game overseas in Germany this week. Falcons, Colts, set your lineups the night before. Make sure they're ready to go bright and early in the morning. We got our early kickoff, especially for you, though, for those of you in the Pacific time zone. But thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week on the BA Sports Podcast for week